This is Lisa from MobileTechReview, and this is the 2025 Razer Blade 16 with the RTX 5090 inside. So a new blade for a new year. So they've gone back to kind of their roots, where they used to be that slim, light MacBook Pro kind of laptop, and then the blades got chunkier and chunkier and heavier because there's two camps of laptops. Obviously, they're the ones that are fully performant, they're thicker, they're heavier, and then they're the more ultra-portable, ultra-light ones, and Razer's started to go after that, like super performant and super chunky one, back to the portable, chill-looking, anodized, black aluminum CNC chassis kind of experience. We're going to look at it now. So it weighs 4.71 pounds. Last generation was 5.4 pounds, so that's quite a weight reduction. Got thinner, 17.4 millimeters versus about 22 millimeters. More portable. Direct competitor here would obviously be the Asus ROG Zephyrus G16. And here is the weird thing in 2025 with crazy pricing, inflation, tariffs, and all that sort of thing in the United States. It's priced about the same as the Zephyrus. It used to be they went neck and neck. Maybe you wanted a blade, but that Zephyrus was $500 or $700 cheaper. Not so anymore. So if you're looking at that class of machine, this is the year when Razer's, because their prices have not gone up, seem more affordable relative to everybody else's who have gone up, wow, ballooned a whole lot expensive. So there's that. All right, we have an OLED display on board, QHD plus resolution, 240 hertz, so it's 2560 by 1600. And it's a lovely display. I know that the other reviewers have already covered this machine. They've just gone on about how awesome it is. Well, you know what? The Lenovo Legion Pro 7 this year has an even brighter OLED display, so it's kind of tough. But I will give this one the thumbs up for having the most beautiful, naturalistic looking OLED display. It doesn't look garish. It doesn't look overly poppy and contrasty. That might be a weird thing to say. You think you can't have too much of that stuff, right? Look at a 1000-nit mini LED gaming laptop. Sometimes it can look a little cartoony when it gets that contrasty. And the colors here, like if you're playing something like Assassin's Creed Shadows, which has beautiful scenery, is naturalistic, photorealistic environment, it looks like you're walking through a photograph. So it's a nice enough panel here. I'm not going to complain, even if it only hits about 400 nits of brightness in SDR mode, full screen, and not 500 like the Lenovo. But good to see Lenovo putting up a fight. So inside we have the NVIDIA RTX 5090. In fact, NVIDIA provided this review loaner here. So I know there's been some brouhaha about NVIDIA beating up reviewers or trying to force them to say certain things. They have not done that with us. Of course, I will say that we are obviously in the second batch of review units that were sent out. Maybe the people who they felt they could bully more easily got the first ones. I really don't know. Anyway, they were chill about it. They had suggestions like covering frame generation, which is kind of duh. That is the thing that's stands out in this generation. You have your choice now. Of course, they always launch for just the high-end 5080 and 5090 at first. You can go all the way down to a RTX 5060 if you want. There's a 5070, a 5070 Ti, 5080, and a 5090. We have the 5090, the highest end model. Being Razer, they like to sort of play these games where they tie certain GPUs with certain CPUs. So one of the tricks with this laptop to get the thermals in control and to make something that is this thin and light, it has AMD Ryzen, which that's great, but it's the Ryzen AI 9 HX370. If you go with less than an RTX 5090 GPU, then you're going to get the 365 processor, which has fewer cores and threads by a bit. So this is last year's decent, power-friendly, shall we say, and heat-friendly processor, and it's good enough for the task, and it makes sense in this machine, because you know what, one of the things people used to complain about with Razer Blades is it gets so hot the battery would blow, right? Or they would run so loud that you couldn't stand the sound, or too hot to touch. This one does not. Playing AAA titles, current ones, Wukong, for example, and again, AC Shadows. You know, it's really nice to run this on performance mode and to see the CPU staying at about 80 degrees centigrade, which is chill. Like, I don't worry about the life of the laptop or the battery when I see temperatures that low. And typically, the Intel 2025 machines that we've reviewed, which are more power efficient and heat efficient than they have been, still are running in the 90s and sometimes even thermal throttling, like the Legion Pro 7 that I just mentioned, which I love that laptop, but it will throttle the cores if it if you're gaming, and you have to do some tuning to try to avoid that problem, and so on and so forth. So this is the blade where you no longer think that the machine might kill itself in 3 years, or at least warrant a battery replacement for bloat. So I think they made the right choice here, and I can see why NVIDIA would want to send out this model as the test case, because really this is where the GPU shines, right? You have a decent enough processor. Don't let me make you think it's crap or something. It's not, but it's not the most powerful you can get for those of you who need processor intensive tasks. This is more about gaming, where the GPU typically matters a lot more. Most games are GPU dependent, right? They're saturating the GPU, not the CPU ever. This thing does really well. So you would think versus the MSI Titan 18 that we just reviewed, right? Monster laptop, Intel HX 285 inside, and an RTX 5090 running at a full 175 watts should blow this out of the water in terms of frames in games. Not talking benchmarks here, the actual real world, while you're buying this thing, frames in games kind of experience, and it comes darn close enough. So that is pretty neat. Now, there will be occasions, not as often, like Baldur's Gate 3 is more CPU dependent than most games, where you won't see as much performance here as you would in something with a more powerful CPU. Not that it won't be playable, but you'll see 70s for a frame rate at native resolution in high settings instead of 90s or something like that. You get the idea. But most games, that isn't the case. So well done to find the right balance here. And also, NVIDIA gets to show off their GPU prowess here without having to worry about the CPU literally hogging cycles, hogging the power and all that sort of thing. Sounds great. What's wrong with it? Well, one thing I really hate is paywalling performance. So even if there is a reason physics-wise for that. So this has a 160 watt max RTX 5090, right? The highest you could go is 175 watts and a bigger chassis and all that sort of thing. But you can go to 175 if you buy Razer's cooler, which looks like the typical trendy laptop cooler today. It's 150 bucks from Razer. So if you plug it in, it knows it's plugged in, and then it'll let you run at 175 watts. So that just extends the price, and you maybe don't want the cooler. Here's what I found, also because of NVIDIA screwing up with the drivers though, is 160 versus 175 watts doesn't get you many more frames in games. Earlier NVIDIA drivers for these 5000 series laptops screwed up, and they artificially limited the 175 watt gaming laptops down to around 155 or to 160. And once the drivers got updated and they could use all the power and wanted up to 175, the frames went up like 2-3 frames maybe per second. You know, that's whatever. It doesn't really matter. So you don't have to buy the cooler to get performance out of this, but still feels a little cheesy, even if physics said that they thought this was the only way they could do it and make a laptop that was going to withstand. The other bad thing is with this platform, Intel has done the same thing with some of their CPU lines too. This is a soldered RAM platform. You do get very fast DDR5 low power RAM on board, 8000 megahertz, but it's soldered, so you gotta live with whatever you buy. So the standard, the base is 32 gigs, which is ample enough. I think it's fine for most folks who are primarily focused on gaming and some 3D rendering and stuff like that. If you're doing a lot of serious video editing with this, which you might be, that's one of the things people like to use this for, I could see you wanting 64. Since it's soldered, Razer's going to pork you Apple style, $700. $700 to go up to 64 gigs of RAM. It does have two M.2 SSD slots at full 2280, which is nice, and you can get it with 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte or two terabyte drives. And given the poshness and the expense of this, I'm kind of like surprised there's no Gen 5 option here, but there is no Gen 5 option. Maybe an AMD limitation for this chipset. I don't know. Speaking of AMD again, why is always AMD Ryzen laptops, gaming laptops, right? The USB-C 4 ports, which should behave just as fine as they do on any laptop, are always a little wonky, like especially like Samsung T5 SSDs, T7, all of those. Very picky about cables and sometimes just disconnecting them. They're just very weird. But it's a little annoying. I found one port's much more reliable than the other for those SSDs, or swapping cables around, which is a pain in the neck, but it seems to be an AMD Ryzen thing for years now. Speaking of those ports, you've got ample ports. You've got 2 of those USB-C 4 ports, and you can use those with docks and all that kind of thing. 2 USB-A 3.2 Gen 2s, HDMI 2.1 connected directly to the DGPU, most excellent, a headphone jack, and a full-size UHS-2 SD card slot for content creators. But the DGPU is only connected directly to the HDMI 2.1 port. It's going to route through the iGPU. Even if it is using the DGPU, it still routes through the iGPU. This is how Advanced Optimus works and all that sort of thing. So you won't get the max possible frames from your game if you're going to use the DisplayPort functionality on the USB-C port. You're kind of stuck trying to find a monitor that's HDMI 2.1. And for those who are going like for high resolution, high frame rate, external monitors and all that sort of thing that depend on 2.1 spec, it's not as common as you might think on monitors still. The Sony M10S, that supports HDMI 2.1. You have to pay attention to that, so there's that. So we have a G-Sync on board and we have Advanced Optimus. Razer does like to kind of micromanage your experience there, and Razer Synapse 4 is part of that experience, for better or worse. People don't love it. People don't love most gaming laptops bundled software. Legion might be an exception there. They could do better with that, but that's another whole video topic. Anyway, you can't just say, I want DGPU mode only unless you go through BIOS settings, which I hear can bork your Windows Hello IR camera. It does have a 1080p Windows Hello IR camera, and reset your pin, which is kind of weird. Why those would be tied together, I don't know. Anyway, you've got Advanced Optimus, so it's going to do that GPU switching thing where sometimes the screen freezes for a minute as it switches between integrated and dedicated graphics. We're used to that sort of thing. And if you're running it unplugged, it insists on running in balance mode. You can't put on echo mode. There's just some weird things about Synapse. Maybe they'll fix it. Something they have fixed is the keyboard, though. I have never liked Razer keyboards. Even though I like their laptops mostly, I couldn't stand those non-tactile, hardly moved keyboards. Well, now we have 1.6 millimeters of key travel, and it feels tactile. I like this keyboard. The first time I think ever with a Razer Blade. It feels nice. Of course, it's per key RGB. You have like 14 brightness levels. You can program it to do all kinds of crazy color things. It's a very good typing experience. The trackpad is huge, as always. It's glass. And why is it so huge? I don't know. I'll just keep asking. Maybe someday somebody at Razer will tell me why it has to be so huge, other than to look like a MacBook, which looks like a Dell XPS, so on. It works fine. I have no problems with palm rejection. Some people have said that they have gotten some that were defective in the first batch that came out, where the trackpad stopped behaving correctly or working at all. We didn't have that problem. I assume whatever that was, they ironed it out. It seemed like a hardware problem. They were doing swaps and exchanges for those early on. Anyway, works great there. Speakers, now we have 6 instead of 4, but don't expect much because Razer really didn't seem to have tuned these speakers, because like downloading a third-party utility, we've got THX audio built in, we've got 7.1 codecs for HDMI out, all this stuff, but the built-in tuning for the speakers is crap. I mean, wow. So I just downloaded FX Sound or something and used the EQ there in settings, and it got much better. I mean, these are not amazing speakers. This is not MacBook Pro level, but at least you can get some bass and stuff like that, and you can make the treble not as hissy. So they're decent. There are 6 of them. They're still not amazing. For a boutique posh laptop, I kind of want amazing audio. You know, if you're going to play that MacBook card, you got to play that MacBook card and do those things. Headphone audio, on the other hand, it is excellent. Very good quality. So that was a lot of talking about a lot of features. Oh, one more feature though, the battery, right? 90 watt hour. It's a little bit smaller than last generation, about 5 watt hour less. That's still a big battery. But we do have a more efficient processor this generation by far. So battery life on this, it is going to depend on what you're doing, and it is a high resolution OLED panel. They are not the most power frugal unless you're fond of displaying black only on your screen at all times, when the pixels actually literally turn off. So about 5 hours of mixed use is what I've been getting, which for something this performant is good, and considering a lot of bigger, thicker gaming laptops manage about 2 hours, it's okay. And here's the bottom. We can see ventilation here with some little mesh to try to stop all the dust from getting sucked in. And over here, that's actual real ventilation in this area. The area around this is faux ventilation. If you watch my videos, you know I hate faux ventilation. Give me more. But in the idea maybe that it routes air more strongly through certain places. And obviously some more vents here. Torx T5 screws hold the aluminum frame on. And as ever with Razer Blade, easy to take off. There's no plastic clips, there's no struggling, just unscrew those and then boom, here we are. So, humongous vapor chamber right here are 2 fans. The boot M.2 SSD, which we got the 2 terabyte model here. It happens to be a Samsung drive. Sometimes they use a Lexar. Either one's good. And here's the second slot in case you want to put in a second SSD. Why not? Expand your storage, right? 90 watt-hour battery right there. The down-firing woofers are over here as part of the 6-speaker audio system. And we have the socketed Wi-Fi card right here, which is a MediaTek card. And with this design, for those of you who hate hot air blowing on your mouse hand, there are no air exhausts on the side. We've got that all along the bottom here. We got the 2 radiators, so the fans over here, and this is the ventilation area. And by the way, the display cable is no longer routed externally at all. It's protected inside. All right, what about gaming? Gaming, excellent. Like I said, the fans are not that loud. They're not annoying sounding either. The temperatures feel good. And the thing about this laptop is I feel like using it like a laptop, you know. All the other gaming laptops that we reviewed, including, again, that Legion 7 Pro, I mean, I love that thing, but even that is thick and heavy, and I don't have this instinct to grab it and pull it on my lap while I'm working with it or playing a game. With this, although you shouldn't stifle on your legs, you should put some kind of cooling pad or elevate it somehow for its best performance. With this, I kept grabbing it and putting it in my lap and using it like a normal laptop. That is another nice experience when gaming. In terms of the frames and the performance and the heat and the noise, that stuff was all very good. Out of the box, it was a little wonky. It took a couple of weeks for NVIDIA and Razer to get their drivers right and BIOS and all that sort of thing. But now it has been very stable. The frame rates are really good. Like I said, competitive with bigger, thicker laptops. The thing is, in the future, you won't have as much upgradability with the RAM. Is something to keep in mind because there is no upgradability of the RAM if you feel like you're going to need more in the future. And also, right now, the performance is really very good. You can play any game you want, AAA game, and get really good frame rates without even hitting up on frame generation for the most part at native resolution. But in the future, if games start to look for more CPU power, this one isn't the sharpest knife in the drawer for CPU. It's just fine. It's okay. It's not that great. Speaking of frame generation, this is the lecture I give every time that we do a 2025 NVIDIA laptop review. If you're not on board with the idea of AI and the AI-generated frames, which NVIDIA does really well here, up to 4x frame generation, they are an AI company. This is the direction they're going. They can only go down a certain nanometer size in the GPU processor hardware anymore. Then it's probably not even worth it for you to consider. I am not that kind of purist. I don't have to have just only excellent raster graphics performance. If I can use frame generation and go from 55 frames and up to 90 instead, which is kind of like my sweet spot for a lot of games that I play that are not first-person competitive shooters, I will do that. I don't see the ghosting. I don't see any of the problems. They've just done a really good job with this. So that's an important thing to keep in mind too. If you're, you know, really only about raster performance and all that sort of thing, you might want to stick with a 4000 last gen GPU and spend a lot less money is the idea. If you can find one, gosh. I'm Lisa from MobileTechReview. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos. And thumbs up if you like this vid.